What happens when two music legends collide on live television in a way no one could have predicted? When Kelly Clarkson asked Jon Bon Jovi the one question that triggered an explosive confrontation, the result became one of the most unforgettable walk-offs in daytime TV history. That afternoon, the Kelly Clarkson Show was running smoothly. The audience buzzed with excitement as Jon Bon Jovi took his seat, his trademark smile lighting up the studio. Kelly leaned forward with her signature warmth, ready to dive into what everyone assumed would be a lighthearted conversation, full of career highlights and friendly banter. "Jon, it's so incredible to have you here," Kelly began, her voice full of genuine enthusiasm. "Your music has been the soundtrack to so many people's lives for decades. I mean, Livin' on a Prayer probably got more people through tough times than any therapist ever could." Jon chuckled, relaxed and charming as ever. "Well, that's the goal, isn't it? Music should be therapy. It should be escape. It should be hope when people need it most." "Absolutely," Kelly agreed, nodding. "And speaking of hope, I have to ask you something that's been on my mind." The energy in the room shifted almost imperceptibly. Jon's smile held steady, but there was a flicker of awareness in his eyes. "Of course," he said cautiously. "Ask away." Kelly hesitated for a split second before pushing forward. "You've always been vocal about supporting working-class Americans, the everyday heroes who do the hard work, who make this country run." Jon straightened slightly, pride flickering across his face. "That's right. Those are my people. That's where I come from. Blue collar, honest folks who work hard for everything they get." Kelly's expression softened, but there was something probing behind her eyes. "That's beautiful, Jon, it really is," she said slowly. "But I'm curious about something, and I hope you don't mind me asking." The studio seemed to hold its breath. The atmosphere had changed, though no one could quite explain how. "You talk so passionately about the working class," Kelly continued carefully. "About people struggling to make ends meet, about the little guy fighting the system. And I love that about you, but Jon, you're worth over $400 million. You own multiple mansions. Private jets, you live in a world most of your fans will never even glimpse. So I just wonder, how authentic is that connection really?" The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. The audience shifted uneasily in their seats. Jon's smile didn't fade, but it hardened, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "I'm sorry," he said evenly. "What exactly are you getting at, Kelly?" Kelly took a slow breath, aware that she'd crossed into dangerous territory. "I'm just wondering whether your message still comes from a place of experience, or from comfort. When you sing about living on a prayer, about struggle and survival, are you singing from memory or from a script? Because the Jon Bon Jovi who lives in a $15 million mansion seems pretty far removed from the guy who can't afford rent." The air in the room dropped several degrees. Jon's jaw tightened as he leaned back slightly, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You think money changes where you come from? You think success erases your history?" "I'm not saying it erases your history," Kelly shot back, her tone growing firmer. "But it does change your perspective. When was the last time you worried about paying a bill? About choosing between groceries and medicine? When was the last time you felt that crushing weight of financial desperation that so many of your fans live with every single day?" Jon exhaled, visibly tense now. "I work with charities. I give back. I've donated millions to help people." "And that's wonderful," Kelly said softly but firmly. "But giving away money when you have more than you could ever spend isn't the same as understanding what it's like to not have any. It's not the same as living paycheck to paycheck, having your power shut off, or facing eviction." The studio was utterly silent. This was no longer a talk show interview, it had become something raw, something real. The discussion had turned into a confrontation about authenticity, privilege, and perspective. Jon's expression darkened. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Kelly's eyes flashed. "Don't I?" she said quietly. "I grew up in Texas with a single mom who worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. I know exactly what it means to struggle. I've lived in a car. I've eaten government cheese. So believe me, Jon, I know what I'm talking about." "I understand struggle in a way that you haven't experienced in decades," Kelly said firmly. Jon's face flushed, the tension in his jaw visible as he struggled to maintain his composure. "And you think that gives you the right to sit there and question my authenticity? To suggest that I'm some kind of fraud?" He shot back, his voice trembling with restrained anger. I'm not calling you a fraud, Kelly replied, leaning forward in her chair, her voice calm but edged with steel. But I'm calling out the disconnect. You can't sing about being broke when you own a yacht. You can't sing about having nothing when you have everything. That's not authentic, Jon. And your fans deserve better than that. Jon's hands trembled slightly, whether from fury or frustration, it wasn't clear. You want to talk about authenticity, Kelly? Fine. Let's talk about authenticity. You're sitting there in your designer dress in your multi-million-dollar studio making millions yourself, and you're questioning my connection to working people? What makes you any different from me? Kelly's eyes flashed dangerously. The difference is I don't pretend I'm still that broke girl from Texas. I don't write songs about struggling when I haven't struggled in years. I don't wrap myself in working-class imagery while living like royalty. I own what I am now, not what I used to be. Jon's laugh was sharp and bitter. That's rich. So what, the moment you made your first million, you should have stopped singing about heartbreak? Stopped singing about pain? Should have thrown out every song you wrote when you were struggling because now you're successful? That's not what I'm saying, and you know it, Kelly countered, her composure starting to crack. Heartbreak is universal. Pain is universal. But singing about being financially desperate when you could buy a small country? That's not universal, Jon. That's dishonest. Jon abruptly stood, his chair rolling back several feet with a loud scrape. The sudden movement drew gasps from the audience. You know what's dishonest? He shouted, pointing toward her. This ambush. This attempt to tear down someone who spent 40 years trying to give people hope and escape through music. It's not an ambush when I'm asking legitimate questions, Kelly fired back, still seated but her voice rising to match his. It's journalism. It's holding public figures accountable for the images they project and the messages they send. Journalism? Jon barked out a humorless laugh. This is tabloid garbage dressed up as serious conversation. You're trying to destroy someone's reputation for ratings. Kelly's face went pale with anger. Don't you dare question my integrity. I've built my career on being genuine with my audience, on having real conversations with real people about real things. And right now I'm having a real conversation about the fact that you're selling a fantasy to people who can't afford fantasies. I'm selling hope, Jon shouted, his composure completely shattering. I'm selling the idea that you can rise above your circumstances, that you can achieve your dreams. That hard work and determination can change your life. What the hell is wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that, Kelly shouted back, rising from her seat now, her voice full of conviction. What's wrong is pretending you're still living those circumstances when you're not. What's wrong is acting like you understand struggles you haven't faced in 30 years. What's wrong is using other people's pain as a costume you put on when it's convenient for your image. The studio crackled with tension. Producers in the control room scrambled, debating whether to cut to commercial or let the moment play out. The audience sat frozen, captivated by something that felt far too raw for daytime TV. Jon's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You have no idea what you've just done. What I've done, Kelly replied, her tone low but unflinching, is ask the questions your fans deserve to have asked. What I've done is refuse to let you hide behind 30-year-old talking points about being a man of the people when you're anything but. Jon's eyes blazed. I've done more for working families than you could ever comprehend, he growled. I've created jobs. I've supported communities. I've used my platform to fight for the people you claim I've abandoned. And that's admirable, Kelly admitted, her tone heated but seeking balance. But doing charity work from your mansion isn't the same as living the life you sing about. It's not the same as being the person your music pretends you still are. Jon's voice hardened. My music pretends nothing. It comes from real places, from real experiences, from a real understanding of what it means to fight for something better. Real experiences from 40 years ago, Kelly shot back. Real understanding filtered through decades of wealth and privilege, through insulation from the very problems you claim to represent. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jon stood motionless, chest heaving, eyes locked on Kelly with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Finally, he narrowed his gaze and stepped closer, his voice a low growl. Truth, you want to talk about truth? Here's some truth for you, Kelly. You've built your entire career on being the relatable girl next door, the sweet American Idol winner who stayed humble. But look around you. Jon's voice dropped to a growl as he took a step closer. Look at this empire you've built, Kelly. You're just as removed from regular people as I am. But at least I don't sit here pretending to be their voice while I tear down other artists." Kelly's expression flickered. Surprise, then anger, and finally something that looked almost like pain. "That's completely different, and you know it," she said, her tone sharp. "I don't write songs about being broke anymore because I'm not broke anymore. I don't pretend to understand struggles I don't have anymore." "That's exactly my point," Jon snapped. "Your point?" Kelly echoed, incredulous. Jon let out a bitter laugh. "Your point is that successful people should just shut up about where they came from. Pretend their past doesn't exist. Stop trying to inspire people who are where they used to be." "My point," Kelly fired back, "is that there's a difference between inspiration and exploitation. There's a difference between saying I came from nothing and made something of myself, and saying I'm still just like you when you're clearly not." Jon began pacing, his movements sharp and restless. "So in your world, the moment someone achieves success, they lose the right to connect with their roots? They lose the right to remember where they came from? They have to become some sanitized version of themselves that never acknowledges the struggles that shaped them?" "That's not what I'm saying," Kelly said, frustration edging into her voice. "I'm saying acknowledge the change. Acknowledge that your perspective has evolved. Don't pretend you're still living paycheck to paycheck when you could buy the company that issues the paychecks. And I'm saying that wealth doesn't erase memory." Jon shot back, his tone rising again. "It doesn't erase the lessons you learned when you had nothing. It doesn't erase the fear of losing everything because you remember what it felt like to have nothing in the first place." Kelly shook her head, her voice steady but intense. "But it does change the stakes, Jon. When you sing about being shot through the heart and being to blame, it hits different when the person singing it can afford the best therapists in the world to help them through their pain. When you sing about living on a prayer, it hits different when the singer has enough money to answer their own prayers 1,000 times over." Jon's eyebrows shot up. "So you're saying my pain isn't real because I can afford therapy?" he asked incredulously. "You're saying my struggles don't count because I have money now? That's the most shallow, superficial understanding of human experience I've ever heard." "I'm saying your pain is real," Kelly countered, "but your circumstances aren't. You can hurt just as much as anyone else, but you can't pretend you face the same dangers, the same fears, the same limitations that your fans face every single day." Jon stopped pacing and turned to face her head on, his eyes blazing. "You know what I think this is really about, Kelly? I think you're jealous. I think you're looking at someone who's managed to stay relevant for 4 decades, who's maintained a connection with their audience across generations, and you can't stand it." The accusation hit Kelly like a physical blow. Her face went pale, then flushed crimson. "Jealous?" she repeated, her voice trembling with fury. "You think I'm jealous of someone who has to lie to their audience to stay relevant? You think I'm jealous of someone who's built their entire later career on nostalgia and false relatability?" "False relatability?" Jon's voice was booming now. "I've sold over 100 million records worldwide. I've filled stadiums on every continent. Millions of people connect with my music, my message, what I represent. But sure, Kelly, it's all fake. It's all an act. Those millions of fans are just too stupid to see through the lies, right?" "That's not what I said," Kelly tried to interject, but Jon was too far gone. "No, that's exactly what you said," he shouted. "You're sitting there telling me my connection to my audience is fake. My understanding of struggle is fake. My entire artistic identity is fake. Well, here's what's not fake, Kelly. The kid from New Jersey who slept in his car while trying to make it in the music business. The guy who got turned down by every record label in New York before finally getting his shot. The man who watched his father struggle to put food on the table and swore he'd never let his family go through that again." Kelly's face softened, her anger tempered by a flicker of empathy. "Those experiences shaped you, Jon. They made you who you are. But they happened 40 years ago. You're not that struggling kid anymore. You haven't been for decades, and continuing to act like you are doesn't honor that kid. It exploits him." Jon's expression twisted with rage. "Exploits him? I am him. Success doesn't change who you are at your core. Money doesn't rewrite your DNA. Fame doesn't erase your fundamental understanding of what it means to fight for survival. But it does change your reality," Kelly insisted, her voice cutting through his. "It changes what you have to fight for. When you sing about these struggles now, you're singing about someone else's life, not your own. You're borrowing pain from people who actually live it." The tension in the room was palpable. Kelly stood her ground, her voice steady despite the chaos. I have every right to ask these questions, Jon. That's what journalists do. That's what interviewers do. We ask the hard questions, and the ones fans are thinking but too polite to ask themselves. Journalists? Jon spat the word like it was poison. You're not a journalist, Kelly. You're a talk show host. You're supposed to make people feel welcome, comfortable. You're supposed to celebrate their achievements, not tear them down on national television. I'm supposed to have real conversations, Kelly fired back. I'm supposed to dig deeper than the usual promotional fluff. If you wanted someone to just smile and nod while you repeated the same talking points you've been using for 20 years, you should have gone on a different show. Jon's face was a mask of fury now, his chest rising and falling rapidly as the studio audience sat frozen, realizing they were witnessing a moment that would live in daytime television infamy. You know what, Kelly? You're absolutely right, Jon said suddenly, his tone sharp and controlled. I should have gone on a different show. I should have gone somewhere where the host actually respects their guests instead of using them as targets for their own agenda. My agenda, Kelly fired back, her voice rising with frustration, is asking legitimate questions about authenticity and entertainment. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. What makes me uncomfortable, Jon said through gritted teeth, is being attacked by someone who clearly has issues with successful people. What makes me uncomfortable is being lectured about authenticity by someone who's just as far removed from regular people as I am. Kelly's eyes flashed dangerously. The difference is I own it, Jon. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't build my brand on a lie. A lie? Jon's voice cracked with disbelief. My entire career is a lie? The decades of music that have helped people through the worst moments of their lives. That's all a lie? Millions of fans who found hope and strength in my songs are all just deluded? Your music isn't a lie, Kelly said, her tone softening for just a moment. But your current image is. The persona you've created around that music is. You're selling people a version of Jon Bon Jovi that doesn't exist anymore. Jon was shaking with rage now. I'm selling them hope, he snapped. I'm selling them the belief that they can overcome anything, that they can rise above their circumstances and achieve their dreams. What the hell is wrong with that message? Nothing's wrong with the message, Kelly replied firmly. What's wrong is the messenger pretending he's still living the struggle when he's not. What's wrong is using other people's pain as a marketing tool. That was it. The line Jon couldn't let slide. His face went from red to white in an instant, his expression frozen somewhere between shock and fury. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold enough to cut glass. Marketing tool? You think I've spent my entire career using people's pain as a marketing tool? You think every song I've written, every concert I've performed, every moment I've shared with my fans has been some calculated manipulation? I think you've lost sight of the difference between honoring your past and exploiting it, Kelly said quietly. And I think your fans deserve better. Jon stared at her for what felt like an eternity. The studio was so silent you could hear the soft hum of the cameras. Finally, he shook his head slowly, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. You know what, Kelly? You want authenticity? Here's some authenticity for you. He took a small step back, his voice steady but laced with contempt. I came here today as a friend. I came here to talk about music and life and the things that connect us all. Instead, I find myself being psychoanalyzed by someone who thinks they understand my motivations better than I do. Jon began backing toward the edge of the set, his movements deliberate and calm, the kind of calm that comes right before an eruption. You want to know what's really authentic? He continued. Walking away from someone who's more interested in tearing you down than building you up. Walking away from someone who's more interested in creating controversy than creating understanding. Kelly stepped forward, her voice trembling just slightly. Jon, don't do this. Don't run away from a conversation just because it got difficult. I'm not running away from a difficult conversation, Jon said, his hand gripping the back of his microphone. I'm walking away from a hostile interview disguised as a friendly chat. There's a difference. The only thing that made this hostile, Kelly countered, her voice carrying a sharp edge that echoed through the studio, was your inability to answer a simple question honestly. Jon stopped in his tracks and turned to face her one final time. His expression hardened, but there was a weary honesty in his eyes now. You want an honest answer? Fine, here it is. He took a deep breath. I'm not the same person I was 40 years ago. My life isn't the same as it was when I was sleeping in my car and eating ramen noodles for every meal. But the feelings are the same. The hunger is the same. The drive is the same. The understanding of what it means to fight for something better, that's the same. Unclipping his microphone, Jon held it out toward her. The difference between us, Kelly, is that I use my platform to inspire people, to make them believe they can overcome their circumstances. You apparently use yours to convince people that success invalidates their struggles. Kelly's expression softened, her face a mixture of frustration and something dangerously close to regret. That's not what I was trying to do, Jon, she said quietly. Maybe not, Jon replied, setting his microphone down gently on the small table beside his chair. But that's what you did. He turned and walked off the set. Not stormed off, not fled. Walked with the kind of dignity that comes from someone who has made peace with their decision. The audience sat frozen in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or simply process what they had just witnessed. Kelly stood motionless for a moment, her microphone still clipped to her outfit, her eyes fixed on the empty space where Jon had been seconds earlier. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. We'll be right back after this commercial break. But everyone in that studio knew there would be no coming back from what had just happened. The damage was done. The words had been said, and one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history had just unfolded. Live and unfiltered for the world to see.